Song for the Imps. How about a song for the Imps? There we go then. Come on, let's get some of the lads together. Let's have a go here. Okay, you're on. Come on, fellas. Get around a go. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Come on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Reds is their name. Stinsel is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our...
They're led by the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Morning all, how we doing? Quick dog walk video this morning. Out and about in the chilly Lincolnshire wolds as usual. You may be listening to this on TalkSport. You may be listening to it on TalkSport for the first time. If you are, the premise is I get bored walking my dog, so I record a mini podcast of sorts, live and direct from the Lincolnshire wolds, and then I occasionally drop it on TalkSport so that people who miss it can listen, or people who don't want to watch on YouTube or Facebook or whatever other social media happens to be in at the time. So it's the morning dog walk. Like I say, it's cold, it's chilly up here, there's frost on the ground, beautiful views out to the North Sea, and the one thing that's on my mind as I'm walking around is the transfer window. Now this dog walk video has been inspired by a tweet this morning from somebody that I've known many years, who said, you know, it's no news at the moment coming out of the club, people are getting worried, and it wasn't the usual hyperbole, it was a genuine tweet, which, you know, I can understand where people are coming from. I don't know if Nick Oxbury's on with us at the moment, but Nick's another one who around my house I call him 3 month Nick, because I only hear from him 3 months of the year: January, June, July, January, July and August, when we come in to try and sign players. So 3 months Nick. And I kind of get it, but the transfer window ends whenever it ends, January the 31st. And to judge how a club is doing in the transfer window halfway through is crazy. You know, how many times have you sat watching a series and halfway through thought this isn't great, and then at the end of it, you know, it all pulls together, or a film or a book or something like that. And as I said to Kev, I mean, we were both in the sales industry for many years, and I mean, I ended up working for a company that sells kitchens, who shall remain nameless, that was very sales focused. You were given a number, you had to hit that sales number, that was that. You know, if somebody had come to me on the 21st of January and said you don't look like you're going to hit your number, and kick my ass, I would have been really gutted, because, you know, a lot of what we did was the last couple of days you'd push to get things out, it would all come good, and very rarely did we miss our number. I didn't leave that industry because I wasn't any good at sales. I lost it because I wasn't any good at, or I left it because I wasn't any good at people, which might surprise some. So anyway, it's hard to judge a transfer window until it's finished. And so I can't come on here and start telling you about Lincoln City's transfer window, about what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong, because it's an outcome driven process. So on the 31st, when the window closes, or whatever day it closes, I haven't actually looked it up, that will be the time to judge. That'll be the time to judge the window. And it'd be all right saying, well, we could have somebody in for Cambridge. Yes, we could have somebody in for the Cambridge game. It could be a hurried signing, the wrong signing that then doesn't work out going forward. My plan later on today, should I get time, is to have a look at last year's transfer window, see who made the most signings, who made the fewest signings, who had the highest squad. Interesting. Boom. Back again. Sorry about that. Must be the cold weather, I would say, affecting my signal. Yeah, so my intention is to see, you know, is the number of signings something that kind of affects how you do towards the end of the season. It's going to be the quality of the signings. So it's all right. People saying Forest Green have been really active, but Forest Green have been really active in the early part of the window, but they still lost on Saturday at home to MK Dons. They're still bottom of the table. So just because they've been active means absolutely nothing. And just for the record, although people think that we haven't been active, there are a number of teams that haven't actually made any signings yet. Derby, Port Vale, Sheffield Wednesday and Wycombe have got no incomings this window as yet. So it's really, really hard, I think, to start saying, Dave, this team's had a good window and that team's had a good window. What it's not hard to do is look down the transfers and go, that catches my eye, this catches my eye. So I've done that this morning. I've run my eye down the transfers, all the incomings, not outgoings as such, and just picked up on one or two that I think, do you know what, that's an interesting one. I quite like the look of that. And I'm going to take you through some of those this morning. First of all, I'm just going to say I'm not going to talk about Ipswich's signings because they're championship level signings rather than League One. We don't have to play Ipswich again. We've played them home and away. I hope Ipswich win every game between now and the end of the season because it means they'll beat some of our relegation rivals and they're not going to be able to beat us. But they've signed George Hurst. They've signed Massimo Luongo, who was at QPR, Australian international. They've signed Harry Clark. I mean, they've just made good signings. Nathan Broadhead, superb signings. Best of luck to them. Do you know what? I've got no malice towards Ipswich at all. They were fantastic when we went there in the FA Cup, and they were a good side, I thought, both times that we've played them. I know that we took 4 points from them, but they're a good team. I hope they go up. I hope they win every game between now and the end of the season. I hope their signings pan out for them, and I hope their fans get the championship football that they deserve. So, you know, best of luck to Ipswich. I'm not picking those signings because, you know, at least 3 of them would undoubtedly be in the top signings, the top 4, 5 signings so far this League One window. No, they're not the ones I've picked. The ones I've picked are kind of, they're more personal, I think. They're more players that we'll know that I look at and think, actually, he could do well there. And 1 or 2 of them are teams in and around us. I've even made notes, which is unusual for me on a morning dog walk. So let's start with Barnsley. They've made a few signings, a few incoming signings, but one that's caught my eye thus far and one that you think, oh, I would like it if we'd signed him, would be Max Watters, who they have brought in from Cardiff City on loan. Now, Max is a player who we were linked with, albeit by the internet rather than reputable journalists. He's a striker. He was at Doncaster Rovers for a while. Then he moved to Crawley last season before. Time kind of slips by, so I can't remember exactly. I think it was season before last. And he absolutely tore it up at Crawley. Scored goals for fun for 6 months. Got a big move to Cardiff, and things have kind of have stumbled a little bit there for him. I think that he is a player who will score goals at this level. I think if you're Lincoln City and you were to sign a Max Watters, that's a marquee signing. I think if you're Barnsley doing it, it's probably, you might feel a little bit less impactful because you're a bigger club and also already have sort of some half decent strikers there. Although Barnsley fans might argue against that when I mentioned James Norwood. But Watters is a really good signing. I think he's got a bit of pace. He can finish. He's still young. He's proven in the division below us. Probably just hasn't quite made it in the division above. Been with Doncaster before, but again, you know, didn't really break through. I think he was released by Doncaster, but I think he's just the type of player who could go to Barnsley, be a success, certainly get them the goals because they're on a good run as well. They're doing really well there under Mickey Duff, I think. Yeah, I think he's a really good signing. I think he's one that stands out. He's one that I haven't heard a huge amount of buzz about. He's one that 1 or 2 Lincoln fans haven't messaged me going, well, we were interested in him. So, you know, it kind of went a little bit quiet. I don't know whether we ever were interested in him or not, but I think that he'll do really well for Barnsley. Next up is Bolton Wanderers. Now, they're not my favourite team by a long way. The elbow thug Afolayan has just left. Heartbroken that he went to Sapoli in Germany, kind of a team who, you know, I really enjoyed, went to see play. I enjoyed the whole ethos around them, and now they've kind of got one of my favourite worst enemies have signed for them, Mr. Elbow himself. But, you know, there you go, I suppose. There's nothing to say really about that. But it's not an outgoing that I really like there. It's an incoming, and it does pain me because I don't like Ian Evatt, and I don't like the way that his team went about the game at our place. I thought it was badly refereed. I thought that they weren't an entirely sporting team, but they are a big team. And they should be making signings at League One level where teams who are 10th and below raise their eyebrows and go, wow, okay, it's a good signing. Randell Williams has joined them. Now, Randell Williams is somebody that we absolutely 100% were linked with. As I understand it, we even spoke to him at the end of, I'll stand corrected here, at the end of the playoff season. So after we'd been beaten by Blackpool, I think had we gone up, there is every chance that we sign Randell Williams. He'd been at Exeter City. He had been superb for Exeter City. And when he left, he moved to Hull City. So he's skipped kind of us at the top end of the division and gone straight into the Championship. Hasn't really managed to do it for them, but he's a player I think will be really good at this level. He is an attacking player. He plays down, I think it's the left flank. He can play left back, left wing back. You could probably even stick him on the left wing. Really attacking, really good. Exactly the sort of player that I would have loved us to have signed permanently, because he would certainly fit in a 3 at the back, but he's a left back that can play both left back and left wing back. So he could have got forward. I think he would have been a super signing for us. Again, probably out of our price range. I'm not saying that these are players that we've missed out on. I'm saying that these are players that I've looked at and gone, I think he'll do well. So I think that Randell Williams signing for Bolton, great signing. I think he'll do really well for them. We've played Bolton home and away. As much as it pains me, I've just said it about Ipswich, I don't care if they win every game between now and the end of the season. In fact, I would prefer them to, because we've played them. We're not going to catch them. They're not one of our relegation rivals. So if Bolton Wanderers don't lose another game, as I said about Ipswich, it means they're beating our relegation rivals. I'm all for that. I am all about that. So fair play to Bolton. I don't want them to be a success from a kind of a moral standpoint, from a Lincoln City standpoint, but from a League One perspective, I think it's great they've signed Williams, and I hope that they win every game from now and the end of the season. I just won't particularly celebrate it. So next up is Plymouth Argyle. Now, the thing about Plymouth is nobody really expects them to still be there at the end of the season. Not the casual observer. The casual observer looks and thinks, well, it'll be Sheffield Wednesday and Ipswich, won't it? Or Derby are on a good run. Or they mention the big names, and that's no disrespect to Plymouth, but it's the biggest city in England not to have hosted top flight football. So they are a relative minnow when it comes to the promotion race. The Ipswiches, the Sheffield Wednesdays, the Derbys, even the Boltons pushing up there. But actually, I really like what they're doing. Ryan Lowe leaves. They replace him. There's a continuity. That's the continuity we're looking for, by the way, when you look at a director of football and kind of that process. We're looking for that continuity. 2-3 years ago, Plymouth were a team that we considered to be below us. I mean, I think that when we first came up, they were even in League Two. I think they went down as we came up. So what they've done is admirable. Now, look, it's not like they've got a small budget. Let's not say we're the same size as Plymouth. We're not. I think traditionally they're a bigger club than us. They've certainly had good levels of investment. They're certainly able to invest probably more money in players than we are, but they do it really, really well. Really well. And they've signed Callum Wright, and he's the third player on my kind of League One transfers that I think is worth keeping an eye on. Now, Callum Wright is a former Leicester City youngster. He was then on loan at Cheltenham. I think he played on loan at Cheltenham when they were promoted, and they had Josh Griffiths, I think, in goal for them, didn't they, the year that they came up? And then he went back to Cheltenham last season, and he was a real shining light for them. And it was a tough season, I think, for Cheltenham Town last season, as it is this campaign. But Callum Wright, really, really good midfielder. That earned him the move to Blackpool in the summer, I believe it was. But he hasn't really done it at Blackpool now. There's probably a reason for that. As we know, I think under the Blackpool manager that's just left, if you're not one that kind of fits in, if you're not one that he likes, there's nothing you can do about it. We see it with Matty Virtue. We've heard it with Jack Payne. I don't know if you heard the boys from the lower league. Look, really, really good podcast. They did an interview with Jack Payne, and Jack Payne was chatting about his experiences as a Lincoln player. in the 2019-20 season, and he said, I knew I should be playing in the 10 role. I was going into the manager. I got my stats on a bit of paper and was showing him my stats compared to other people's stats, but I couldn't get a look in. I couldn't get in the team. I just wasn't favoured. I think that's the only thing, if I'm honest, it's probably held Callum Wright back a little bit. I think going to Plymouth Argyle is perfect. It could be that he swaps places with Blackpool at the end of the season. I think he's there on loan, but there's obviously a likelihood that they can sign him permanently. I think he'll do really well there. I like Plymouth's brand of football. It's risky. I think we've only conceded 1 goal more than them, and they're kind of top of the table, and we're bottom half of the table. It's risky. They concede goals, but they just score for fun. And I think that Wright will facilitate that kind of fast-moving football up the field. Good in possession, can pick a pass. I think he's a player that's going to do really well. I don't even need to can look at my notes for the next two. They're both relegation rivals. And the first one that I'm going to pick up on is Cambridge United, who we play this weekend. They're in a mess, by the way. 12 goals they've conceded in 3 games. I did a podcast with their guys on the weekend, and they were not happy about what's going on at the club. They can't see any way forward out of the bottom 4. I saw a tweet this morning from a good friend, Roy. He'd been speaking to one of their fans, and they've said they're in a mess. They admit it. They're struggling. They don't know where their next point's coming from. Would surprise me if Cambridge are not League 2 next season. I'm almost certain that they're going to go down. But they have made changes to try and stop the rot, to try and halt the slide, and they've brought in 2 players. Now, the one I want to talk about, I'll come into in a minute, but they've brought in Ryan Bennett, defender, who I think is, obviously they've got to try and stem the flow of goals. 12 goals in 3 games is poor, and one of them 5-1 against Shrewsbury. It's not like Shrewsbury are the most free-flowing attacking team in the division, but absolutely trounced them. Sheffield Wednesday, I think, with the other team, and then there was a 2-0 in between that, so 5-1 and a 5-0. It's not good at all. But the other player they brought in, and they brought him in on loan, and it's an odd one because they brought him in on loan from another League One club, is Steve Seddon. And it seems like I'm focusing a little bit on left backs here, doesn't it? Because obviously Randall Williams was could play fullback as well. But I've gone for Steve Seddon, who, again, as I understand it, he was somebody that I think we looked at in the Michael Appleton's summer. Now, whether that was after the playoffs, I think, so that summer, the transfer window that generally is regarded as not a particularly strong one. Now, Seddon was a Birmingham City player. I think he went on loan to Wimbledon, if I'm correct. I really liked him. I thought he was quite mobile. I thought, he looked probably to be a League One player, but he looked like the type of player that drops out of the Championship, sits in League One and does really, really well. Last season played 36 times for Oxford, and Oxford were a decent side. They're not a terrible side this season, but they were a decent side last season. This year he struggled to get in. I think he's played 13 times in League One. I think that's a really sensible signing for Cambridge, because he's got experience at this level. And people might say, oh, well, he's a cast off from another League One team. He's not going to take you to the next level. But if you're in Cambridge's position right now, and to a degree, maybe ours, to a degree, I don't know, certainly we're not in there quite as bad as them, but you want somebody that's played at this level for a couple of seasons. You want somebody who's not going to come in and struggle, who's not going to come in like Dan Lundley, with the greatest respect to him, who came in and didn't realise what it took to be a League One player. He does now. Fair play to him, but you can't have that. Harry Boyes, who we've signed from Forest Green, kind of fits this bill. Or sorry, we've signed on loan for Sheffield United, but was at Forest Green. He's been at this level for 6 months. He understands to a degree what it takes. He's performed. He's got some assists for the team. And I think with Steve Seddon and Cambridge, they're giving themselves a fighting chance of stemming the flow of goals. I think the issue that you have there is, you can be a good player, go into a struggling team and struggle, or you can be an average player, go into a good team, and it brings out the best in you. There's no such thing as good players and bad players, not really. And I think you only have to look at our transfer business last winter. Liam Cullen didn't do particularly well with us, scoring for Swansea now. Morgan Whittaker, I thought, actually did all right, but look what he did when he went to Plymouth. He's now getting linked with transfers to Rangers and several £1 million. You know, that was a player who we were playing at right wing back, and Lincoln City fans were booing onto the field. And that's 12 months, less than 12 months, fewer than 12 months rather, between him being booed onto a Lincoln City game and being linked with the second biggest team in Scotland. So there's no such thing in my mind as good and bad players. There are good and bad environments for players. And I suppose it goes back to Jack Payne. I mean, Jack Payne and George Grant signed at the same time. Both good players, I think, at this level. George Grant struggled a little bit under Danny and Nicky, let's be honest, in and out of the side. We didn't really get the best of him. Jack Payne, I thought, played his best football under Dan and Nick. They left, Mike Clapperton came in, role reversal. Next thing you know, Jack Payne's the one struggling, George Grant's the one thriving. So it just goes to show, no such thing as good and bad players, good and bad environments. So will Cambridge be a good environment for Steve Seddon or a bad environment? If it's a good environment, he might solidify them. He might help get a couple of points, keep them out of the bottom four. Could go the other way, but I think he's the right type of player. Now, the final one I've picked, this is a real roll of the dice, I think, by a relegation rival, and it's Morecambe I've gone for. They have picked up Dan Crowley. Now, Crowley, I think, was at Hull for a while. I seem to think he was also at Birmingham, so probably similar to Steve Seddon. He's a player that I think City players used to look at and think we should sign him because his name's a bit like our manager. I used to look at him and think we should sign him because he's got a spark of creativity. He was unpredictable. He was good on the ball. He could make things happen. Bit of a maverick. My understanding is that there might be a few issues potentially around, I don't know, attitude, application. There's a reason why a player with such talent hasn't gone on and kind of built a much better career. I mean, when he was at Birmingham, there was talk of him moving elsewhere in the Championship. I remember when he was at Hull, that was a decent Hull side, by the way, that we played the year that we got to the playoff final. You think the likes of Josh McGuinness, they had the lad whose name I can't quite think of now, who was Gavin White, I think was there, wasn't he? That's who I'm thinking of, who was at Oxford, come from Ireland. But they had Crowley. I always liked Crowley every time I saw him. Now, it's a bold move from Morecambe. They need goals. You know, it's all right if you're down the bottom of the table and you don't concede, that's not too bad. But if you don't score and you do have a tendency to concede, which is where Morecambe are, that isn't good. And look, Plymouth have shown that you can be a huge success in this division. And it sounds so obvious and so stupid, but by scoring more than the opposition. I call it the Ossie Ardiles method because I think many years ago, and it's before some people's time, when Ardiles was at Spurs, it used to be, well, if you're going to score 4, we'll score 5. And okay, they didn't win a Premier League title on the back of it, but they entertained, and it was a method that worked. You know, it's complete opposite to the Arsenal 1-0, which of the late 80s, where they were just tight and nicked the odd goal. And I think that's where we are. But Morecambe are neither here nor there at the minute. So they've gone in to try to sign somebody who's got some creativity, who's got some ability, who's got a spark, who might get fans excited. And you know, Morecambe's not a place known for exciting fans. They're punching well above their weight, and it's the sort of signing that you'd expect a team like them not to pull off, if you know what I mean. You know, they've not got the biggest of budgets. Arguably, I'd say one of the lowest in the division. Derek Adams is known as a bit of a dour manager, a dour personality. Thought they were poor when they came to our place. They must be. They're one of only 2 teams who've beaten at home this season. So to go and sign a player who's a bit of maverick, an unknown quantity, somebody who's been hit and miss, but you know can be utterly brilliant on his day, I think he's really, really bold. Really bold. And I'm not going to wish them every luck because we still have to play them again, and they're a relegation rival. And we play them actually on the last away game of the season, which the group of us are turning into my stag weekend. I'm hoping by that point we're safe, and so that if Dan Crowley is a success and he does turn up that day and he does put us to the sword, then you know I kind of hope that we're already safe. So they're the signings that I have picked out. Just to recap, I've gone for Max Watters at Barnsley. I think it's a good signing. I've gone for Randell Williams at Plymouth. I think he'll do well. I've gone for Callum Wright. Randell Williams at Bolton, Callum Wright at Plymouth. I've gone for Dan Crowley at Morecambe, and I've gone for a wild card, Steve Seddon at Cambridge United. Let's not forget, at the end of the window, which is only in a week or so's time, there will be more movement. There will be probably a new set of 5 players. There'll be teams like Sheffield Wednesday and Derby and Port Vale and Wickham who have then made signings to strengthen their own push. And just because a team hasn't made signings at this point in January doesn't mean they've had a poor transfer window. There are teams who are in a negative equity, as I would call it, in the transfer window. So they've let more go than they have signed. There was a couple, I think, that signed one and let two go. Negative equity, but they won't be at the end of the transfer window. So every Lincoln City fan panicking and worrying that we're not really in with a shout at the minute, we're not really making any signings. You've got to wait. You've got to wait till that window closes. Judge then. And even then, it's hard to judge, but you can say whether you think it's been a good or a bad window. And, you know, inevitably you might be right, you might be wrong. I mean, I've had it whereby I thought we had a half decent window a summer or so ago, and we didn't. And I think that we had an average window this summer, and it's actually not turning out, I don't think, to be that bad. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I do also want to mention Bristol Rovers. Joey Barton has been busy, and there are some teams you just know are going to be busy, like Jim, who's on board. Morning, Jim. He says, wonder where Wickham will go. Connor Wickham. Forest Green have been busy. It's in and outs, always is with them. Too much money, not enough restraint at Forest Green. Wholesale changes. Any team making 6 or 7 signings and 6 or 7 exits and completely overhauling their first team have got a rebuilding job on their hands. We don't want to be doing a rebuilding job at Lincoln City. I know that some people think that the whole squad's not good enough, but that's not correct. It's not accurate. It's not. We've got a decent makings of a squad. We need a central midfielder. We need a striker. We know that. But you wouldn't want us to sign 2 centre-backs, 2 central midfielders, 3 wingers. Where are you going to play them all? Team harmony. We saw it with Forest Green the year we came up out of the National League. Okay, they came up with us through the playoffs. But what cost them that season? They were streets ahead of us, but it was Mark Cooper. Split in the dressing room. You're either with me or you're against me. If you're against me, go in the dressing room next door. Keanu Marsh-Brown or whatever in the dressing room next door, gone the next week. Aaron Racine, I think, was their captain, wasn't he, at the time? Didn't play for them much after the game against us. You can't have that kind of disharmony. And if you're struggling at the bottom of the table and you're lacking quality in key areas, you have to make subtle additions that will make serious difference. And at Cambridge, that's where, you know, they've got the boy Ironside up top. He'll get you goals. He will get you goals. He did it against us. But they're then looking at the back and going, well, actually, we need a couple of adjustments there. Bennett and Seddon come in. Not saying it's going to save them, but it's the sort of transfer policy that I have more respect for than Forest Green throwing the net out, dragging in who they can, and you know, overhauling their first team. And it was all well and good. Jamie Robson crossing for Jordan Garrick to score on the first, their debut, and everyone going, oh, it's great, what great recruitment. Forest Green, they lost to MK Dons the next Saturday. I think Forest Green go down this season as well. I think Cambridge do, sadly, but I think Forest Green do. I think both approaches probably will fail. And what does that tell you? It tells you that really, no matter what you do at this point, signings you make, players you bring in, it's as much to do with what's already at your club. The manager, the players that are already there, the structure that's already there. And I think you can see that to a degree last season for us, because we had a good transfer window last winter. Brooke Norton-Cuffy, John Marquis, Ben House came in, Charlie Kendall came in, etc. I thought Morgan Whittaker did relatively well. We had a decent transfer window. Did it actually change all that much? We picked up 3 wins out of 4 in January, which pulled us away from the relegation zone, but then we still lost to Doncaster, we still lost to Gillingham, we were still woeful in home games at times. Didn't really matter who we signed, did it? It was all to do with how the club is at the time, what sort of club you're going into. And it goes back to that. There are no good players and bad players. There are no good signings and bad signings, just good environments and bad environments. And I think Cambridge and Forest Green are 2 environments at the moment, and I don't know them inside out, that are not fully conducive to League One football. I think Ipswich Town, okay, they've made some brilliant signings, but they're a team that they'll challenge at the top of the table no matter who they sign in this window. Okay, there might be marginal positives, but they'll be challenging up there. Sheffield Wednesday have made no signage yet. It doesn't mean they're in a worse position than Ipswich Town. It doesn't. Certainly not at this stage. Come the 31st or whenever the window closes, potentially. Anyway, so that's my roundup. I want to go to Bristol Rovers quickly. Joey Barton. I kind of got sidetracked a little bit. I had to chuckle that Trevor Clark and Alfie Kilgore have gone. Alfie Kilgore's joined Mansfield for an undisclosed fee, and he's loaned Trevor Clark over to Ireland. absolutely hilarious. They're two players that he called out when we beat them 6-3. Yeah, I think he only had the two fit centre backs and he left one of them on the bench, if I remember correctly, in Kilgore. So he's finally moved people on, which I think's quite interesting. But yeah, he's been particularly busy, and I don't like Joey Barton, but I think that is an environment actually where if you're in and you're not favoured, but if you're in and you're a player who's kind of settled at Bristol Rovers, it's not actually a bad place to be. He does foster an us and them mentality. He's a modern day Steve Evans, isn't he? Same sort of approach. Piss everyone off, get in everybody's ear, just probably a little less of a risk of diabetes or heart disease at this stage in his life, and probably a little bit more violent with his loved ones, allegedly. I don't know. So, but he's just a modern day Steve Evans, I'd say. Anyway, so there we go. That's my roundup of the transfer window so far. But there's nothing signed, sealed and delivered. Lincoln City's transfer window has not been a success or a failure based on two players. I'm going to go back through a couple of the comments. Fewer watching today, only 20 or 25 people watching. I'd imagine that's because I only put it on certain outlets. Andrew Robinson, morning Gary, hope you're well, bit nippy this morning. Yeah, it's cold, mate, out here. My hand's getting cold. Andy Blackburn, good morning, looking forward to the live podcast. So those who don't know, we have got a live podcast coming up. It's February the 9th at the Legends Lounge with Danny Butterfield, Mark Kennedy. Hopefully there's going to be a player, some former players are going to be there as well. Listen to the full podcast. You can find out how you can get tickets. Jim West's on board. I think Chef Wednesday fan, morning Jim. Wednesday definitely bringing a couple in, he says. And he also says Mandrio looks like he could be a player for you in the end. Yeah, I think so. Just got to adjust to League One. He's come over from Ireland. I think he looks like a good player. I think he just probably needs a little bit more awareness of, League One, kind of a physicality maybe, and perhaps a slightly different approach to get the best out of him. But I think he's going to be good. Peter Wilson, think Macauley Bonne could be a great signing for Charlton. Unfortunately, I'm not so sure. I didn't think he was all that for Ipswich. I saw him for Charlton the first time when Lee Bowyer was there. He played against us at Sincilbank. We won 2-0. Not so sure with Macauley Bonne. I've always had this thing in my mind with Bonne that he's a little bit weak. He came on loan to us in the National League season and got a bit of a shot against Barrow, and that was it. He just disappeared after that. I mean, he scored a crucial goal. I'll always have a soft spot for Macauley Bonne. The scoring against Tranmere for us to beat them 1-0 at their place, and ultimately I think kind of put us on a path with promotion. So yeah, he could be a decent player. And Charlton Athletic, a team that we've now played twice, but probably you wouldn't say are a relegation rival of ours. They're above us now. I hope they win every game against teams below us. That's how I am. That's where I am with everything. If we've played you twice and you're above us in the table, crack on, win all your games. And Jim West, Wednesday, I've got Iwikwi. Yeah, that'll kill Lincoln. We remember him well. James Bannon is still to come back next month, so already a big squad. Yeah, John. Not saying it because you're on, but yeah, a couple of mates who are Chef Wednesday fans. I do the Wednesday Till I Die podcast every year because I like Sheffield Wednesday. I do. They were always a team growing up. They were the local big team. It was them or Forest. And, my old man always used to say, keep an eye out for those teams, hope that they do well. I could have been a Forest fan if it wasn't for my brother kicking off one morning before the game we were meant to go to, which I'm forever grateful for, which is unusual because normally when he kicks off, even to this day, I'm not. So yeah, and I do want Wednesday to do well, not against us. I'd like to see them go up, mainly because it makes it slightly easier for us next season, because Wednesday are a big club with big buying power, and if they're in the Championship, they're fishing in slightly different waters to us. And although rumours that we signed Paddy O'Connor ahead of Wednesday, made me feel good, there was also the fact that I think we were in for who's the boy that plays wing back for you that was at Middlesbrough. It's not Marvin Robinson, is it? He's the forward that played for us. Can't think of his name now. But whoever, Marvin Johnson, I think, is a player that I think we were linked with, known to Michael Appleton. You came in and took him away. And why wouldn't you pick Sheffield Wednesday over Lincoln City? Why wouldn't you pick Derby County over Lincoln City? Charlton Athletic. For me, it's the Port Vales, the Cambridges, Bristol Rovers. They're the ones that we need to be beating to players. So look, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I've droned on for 34 minutes. I'm only halfway around my walk because my reluctant dog has got halfway round and now can't decide whether he wants to turn back. and he's not going to get the choice. I hope you have a fine Tuesday. If you're playing tonight and you're a team we've already played twice, up you go. Beat whoever you're playing. Give us more of a chance. Let's hope at the end of tonight's games, there's still 6 points between Lincoln City and the relegation zone. And just keep the faith. There's no point in judging the transfer window until it has, in the words of Kate Jackson, slammed shut. Transfer window doesn't gently ease shut. It's not on self-closing hinges. It slams shut like a door in an argument. And let's just hope when it has slammed shut and we're walking away from it, that we're not feeling as bad as sometimes you do when you do slam a door in an argument. Best of luck. Enjoy your Tuesday. Up the Imps.